beautiful souls. It's Robin, and you're listening to the Live Life Balance podcast. I'm so excited that you dropped by today, prioritizing you and your wellness. This podcast is for my empty nester mamas, women who are getting close to this new chapter, who have dipped one toe in, or who are fully embracing this new phase. This is for the mamas who are ready to take back their health, to live their best lives. If you're looking for an authentic, supportive community, you're definitely in the right place. It's a space for us to learn how to prioritize ourselves again. I'll be your guide, pointing you to ideas and tools that you can experiment with to see what feels good for you. You'll also hear guests talking about their journeys and what's worked for them. Together, we're going to learn how to use the 1% shift method to create little shifts and habits that, who knows, maybe become your non-negotiables to feel your best. By feeling our best, we can show up in our purpose and live the most joyful life, even in the challenging times. And boy, this new chapter can seem challenging, but I can assure you we're not alone. Some of the topics we're going to talk about are self-love, self-care, nutrition, daily toxins, food swaps, mindset, and reframing our thoughts. I hope you leave each time feeling a little more empowered and at ease to take a step or two that will allow you to shine. Are you ready? If you said yes, take a nice deep breath and say, I am ready. Now let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. We're going to have Tanisha Shedden on for an amazing conversation. She's so caring, she's supportive, she's guided by her passion to help heal people. After facing major trauma and PTSD in her own life, she embarked on a healing journey that led her to become a licensed therapist, a coach, and a public speaker. As a coach, she works one-to-one with clients to help them identify and address root causes of their trauma. She does this by providing safe and supportive space where the clients can explore their emotions, they learn coping mechanisms, and they develop a deeper understanding of themselves. Tanisha advocates and educates on topics such as trauma, healing, and mental health. As she fosters community through her work, Tanisha uses her voice to create meaningful understanding around issues that can affect us all. I really and truly do think you're going to find this episode enlightening, and I think that you'll be able to walk away with one or two things that might resonate with you. So without further ado, let's get into our conversation. Hi, everybody, and I am so excited that you're here today. I am welcoming my guest, Tanisha, and I'm so excited to have her here today, and I can't wait to get started in our conversation. So, hi, Tanisha, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to
Absolutely
chat with you. And
Yes. So for those of you who don't know Tanisha, she is a counselor, she's a speaker, she's a coach, she specializes in trauma. And so I just thought it would be beneficial for us to have a conversation because it is an important topic for everybody's health and wellness. So Tanisha, if you want to just give us a little background, how you came into being a coach and a speaker and all the things, and why you got interested in the topic of trauma.
Yeah, thank you so much. For me, I have my own journey. And so part of me becoming a counselor had a lot to do with my own journey, and also just wanting to understand families and people in a better and different context. So for me, I grew up with a lot of family trauma. So I am a transracial adoptee. And so I was adopted by a white family in Utah and was raised, I think my parents did a great job at raising me. I think there were just certain parts, right, that didn't go so well. So my parents had a divorce, and I was sexually abused when I was a small child. And then, all of that kind of snowballed. And after the divorce, there was just more kind of, I wouldn't call them micro traumas, but just more things that became hard in my life. I struggled a lot with my mental health when I was young, even though I didn't know that's what it was. I had all of these emotions, and I was starting to remember the abuse I experienced when I became a teenager. And my parents just thought, we took her to a therapist a few times when she was young and she's okay. But it turns out just all of those memories were repressed. And so I started to really struggle when I was an older teen. And I Also, there was just more things happening. My dad, I have no contact with my dad, and it's because when I was a teenager, he had gotten remarried and he actually moved to the Philippines to work, and he would come back and forth between the two. And he started a new family in the Philippines. And I found out about that when I was in my mid-20s. And so there was all this stuff going on. I was like, why are you behaving that way? Our relationship changed. He was treating me very differently, and he was being, just kind of pulling away, not answering. He would never answer phone calls. And he used to be the type of dad that I could fully rely on. And then as I got older, he never picked up a phone call after I turned like 20 ever again. And, I started to realize there was something going on. And then I found out, through a process, he was excommunicated from my church. And that's how I found out that he had done all of that stuff. And there were all these lies, and it was just this culmination of things. And so when I got to college, I started studying marriage and family because I wanted to understand just like family systems and like the psychology behind it, because my family was so crazy. So I wanted to know. And then, I ended up going the therapy route after studying social work in graduate school and being able to get my license and starting to be able to really help people. And my professors really emphasized the importance of trauma and understanding that like the root really is like we have all these offshooting issues that can happen in a person, but the root really is trauma. And just from my own experience, that really resonated with me. And I started learning and trying to learn how I could help other people. And so that's why I went down that route. And yeah, that's kind of what brought me to the field. And I chose more of the coaching side. I chose to, kind of go the coaching side simply because there's two things. There's a lot of red tape in therapy. And I love practicing under my license, but there's some things that keeps people from being able to access therapy. You know what I mean? The prices, the insurance, and all of that stuff. So I actually decided to go and offer coaching on the side as well, because I felt like it was more accessible to people. And there were some more things I could do also. There were different things that I could help people with from that point of view, with a different sort of relationship than just being a therapist. And that's what I love, is being able to empower people and build those relationships with people, and still help them through things, but also just not being limited by certain things, So that's a little bit about me.
Well, first of all, you're very well spoken, and your story, everybody has a story, right? And everybody has challenges they've gone through. But what I love about yours is, even though you had those challenges, you really didn't use it as limitations. You used it more for the good of yourself and for others. And I think that's so important for people to hear that and to know that that's possible. And the evidence is there for you to see that even through those challenging times, it has really propelled you forward in a way that you're now able to help other people. And I feel like all humans experience things, and then we all have a voice from what we experience. And then it's how we use our voice that really can impact people positively. So thank you for the work that you do, because I think that for me, just recently learning about trauma and what trauma actually is and what it means to people and the psychology behind it and all of that, I would love to learn from you what you have learned as far as when someone has some trauma, whether it's what I call little trauma or big trauma. All trauma affects people. And how do you start the unraveling process when you're working or coaching people to start to understand where their trauma might be, throughout their life experience?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, so I like to personally start with, I like to get the background, right? That's important just for context, because that helps me understand, as a practitioner, understand so many things. Because certain types of trauma, if they occur, Like, for example, for me, if my sexual abuse trauma occurred outside of the context of the family, that's going to look very different than it occurring inside the context of the family. Because inside the context of the family, we have insiders involved, right? Outside the context of the family, we have maybe the perpetrator is the outsider and everybody else inside has a different, so it's a different viewpoint. There are different connections and there are different ways that can affect you. So I always like to start with a little bit of the background. And then the first thing I like to have people do is just start building body awareness, because for most people, trauma can affect them in two different ways. The first way is it manifests very clearly in the body. They are having, tight chests, sore hips. They're having hard time breathing. They have underlying health issues. Trauma will kind of bring that out and people can kind of not be aware. And so the body is really important because you have to regulate certain mechanisms in the body. And that starts with the vagus nerve. That's so important. Your nervous system is like the number one most important thing when it comes to regulating trauma. And then, there's your breathing, there's other parts of your body that you just need to be able to recognize when something is coming up for you, what that physical response actually is and how you can work through it. So if you're having a lot of panic attacks, right, we're going to start in the body. We're going to start learning how to regulate breath, and we're going to start learning how to regulate our own physical experience so that over time we have no more panic attacks, right? We can actually get there by building that body resilience. And then the other thing I like to have people start working on is just this, I guess, the other way that trauma manifests, which is it actually becomes so overwhelming to us that we just shut it all down and we become creatures of numbness. And when somebody is a creature of numbness, they're not aware, they're not really body aware, they're not having those sensations yet. And that is something called dorsal mode. And I like to explain it as you've gone over a hill, right? Trauma is a hill. And when you go up the hill and you're at the peak, that's where we see the panic attacks. That's where we see a lot of those physiological, I call them the loud responses. Maybe in men, it might look like a lot of anger, a lot of externalization, females too, but it just can present differently. And then as you start going over that hill, it turns into just like a deep depression that is numbing, and where people start to struggle feeling and identifying even their own emotions, let alone physiological responses. So that's really where I like to start, is just we have to see where our body's at and work with it from where it's at. And it can be scary for people who are kind of over that hill, because if we're over that hill in that depression, what I'm bringing them back to actually ends up being towards that peak. And that's the scary part of trauma, is when we have all of these emotions coming up, but we need you toward the peak because I need you to go back down the other way, the other direction of the hill, right? Where there's more of a normalness, right? So I think for many of us, we're either up the hill on the peak or over the hill. We want to be on the other side of the hill.
You got to get back on the other side. Okay.
Yeah.
I love several things. I was just writing some things down because it was a lot of things just really struck me. But first of all, I love that, you meet people where they are, because honestly, that is a best coaching practice, to have that ability to be able to meet someone where they are, and everybody's different. And so I think when we're capable of doing that, they have more progress. The other thing that really struck me was the vagus nerve, because in what I learned and what I work with my clients on is resetting, the nervous system, bringing it back into a balance where you're not always in fight or flight, when you actually can rest and digest and, being in the parasympathetic. And so I think, having, again, the ability to regulate that nervous system is good for all health, and if you're someone that has trauma that needs addressing, that is a tool and a tip that you can use to start working on personally. The breathing techniques, the grounding, learning how to, be present and calm yourself. There's lots of different ways to re-regulate, that part of your nervous system. What are some of the ways you teach people to recalibrate or come back out of the sympathetic and back into the parasympathetic?
That's a good question. So one of my favorite ways is to use, I actually like to use more of a visualization technique. And it's right, you're using these skills, you're using breathing. So when I guide you through something that's like a visualization meditation, it's really, we're using our breathing, we're going to be grounding, we're going to be coming comfortable with our surroundings, and then we're going to visualize something. I always start with something that practitioners that do EMDR would call safe space. And so that's where I start, is I have them visualize that safe place and take themselves on the journey, because I think we have so many stimulus around us that are negative. And so we start by building positive stimulus in the brain through those visualizations and through those techniques of just breathing and grounding. That's where I start. And then as time goes on, I'll help them get more physical. It depends. If we're distance delivered, which is most of my clients, I want to get to the office space point. But when we're distance delivered, we're going to be working on how we can integrate this in our own lives and, starting to do the work in our body. So I'll help them build what I would call a restorative routine of what are 3 things that you can do during the week to get back in touch with your body in a safe way, a way that feels safe for you. So that could look like we start incorporating some yoga. And then when you're with me, we do some of that visualization work, and we do some of that. I also do something where clients can push on the wall, and it sounds crazy, but it's just a practice of, it's just one of those somatic therapy practices. And then outside of therapy, it's like, okay, what kind of things do we do for our body? Taking care of our body on a regular doesn't necessarily mean like you're going to be working out or anything, but maybe it's a walk. Maybe it is stretching for 15 to 20 minutes. It's things that they can incorporate as a regular practice for their body as they're working through these things, as they're releasing this trauma from their body. And that regulation is just a baseline for setting them up for success, because I think I love that you mentioned that it's important for their overall health, because so many people with trauma, because of the impact of the stress hormones and all of the other things, chronic illness is rampant in trauma survivors. And so what we're really dealing with is we're starting from the bottom of that, like building softness and slowness into our lives so that we can then start overcoming these things in real time, and we start having that wellness. And the more of that we have, the more we can really work through things. And everybody's different, because some people really, they have some things they need to talk about, and we're going to talk through those things as we kind of build that process for their body as well.
Yeah, I just love everything you're saying. Like, I think your work is so amazing, and it is life-changing. And for anybody who's listening, these things that she's talking about, and creating that daily habit, it's self-care, really. It's really, what can you do for yourself on a daily basis that brings you back to a more calm state? And through that, you are able to process the trauma that you may have had during your life. But even when you're past that, you still have to have those practices in place for your health and wellness. And so that then helps you to move through other challenges that you might come across in a more positive and in a way where you'll be able to process it differently than maybe what you used to do with your other coping mechanisms. The other thing that I found very interesting that you said was numbing out. I think so many of us do that. I think things become overwhelming, and we don't have the tools, and we don't have the wherewithal to know what to even do with the tools that we need in order to move through things. And so it's like our body's protectiveness, it protects us by making it seem like it doesn't exist. And that's the way I kind of look at that. And I think probably more people have that than even, obviously than know it. And so if you're working with somebody who has done that, and use that as a coping mechanism, do you find it difficult to bring them out of that, to then bring it to the forefront so that it's no longer being suppressed or numbed out?
So that can be something that's that one is a little bit more of a difficult process, but I don't want anyone who's like in that situation to lose hope, because there are a couple reasons why we do it. And there's different levels, right? So we all kind of dissociate. We all at one time, for example, an example of dissociation on the low scale is like maybe you scroll on Instagram too much when you're feeling emotional. That's an example of just completely kind of trying to distract yourself. And then there are people who really, really go far, and they go far into it to where, there's a wall, a mental and emotional and physical wall. And that is a little bit more difficult. But the process of bringing someone out of that, I always like to start with the voice, actually. So I'll do what are vagus nerve exercises by stimulating the vocal cords. And I find that people who are really numb also suppress their voices. And so starting with their voice and just helping them, one, speak about difficult things sometimes, two, even just vocal exercises. Sometimes, we'll start with humming, and it seems so silly when you're not in the room doing it and it's not the therapeutic exercise, but I like to practice with that, them using their voice, learning things like simple as setting boundaries with the people who are closest to you in your life, and learning how to do that. And then we start to get to the point where, okay, let's pick an emotion or an experience that we really have shoved down. Let's pick the one that feels the most safe, and let's talk about it. Let's get to the point where we can experience the emotion attached to it. Because I think when you're really deep in that mode of shoving everything down, we do the body work, we do all that stuff, but it also comes down to, there's also a habit of ignoring our pain. And in order to get out of that habit, we do kind of have to acknowledge it. And I like to make it as safe as possible. And that's the part that's really difficult, because it can be so difficult for someone to feel safe bringing something up, even if it's a small thing, if they're used to disassociating so much, right? And so I've had people tell me, little stories about a shameful thing they did when they were a teenager, right? A very minor, what I would perceive as minor experience with shame, like maybe the first time they were ever bullied, or maybe an experience where they made a mistake that nobody ever knew about and they never got in trouble for. Those types of minor infractions in their life. It's not even like the trauma that they really have, it's just the little things, but they're so used to shame and numbing and hiding that those feel so intense to them. Yeah. And so we start with that, and then we can start going. And I like to have those clients journal and get it out other ways too, because I think what really happens with them is it's just, there's no way out. There's no way for it out. They're holding it close to themselves because it doesn't really feel safe. And that takes a little bit longer, but it is doable.
Sure. So much stuff was just, going crazy in my mind as you spoke, because, when you were talking about those little infractions, I think that's what I call is like little trauma, right? Because even though they're really small and they're not as life altering for some, for others, it's life altering. And, one thing that came to my mind, I've had two experiences that just popped up as you were speaking, but when I was in like the third grade, we had just moved to Florida, and we didn't know anybody. And for some weird reason, the teacher assigned me to work with this boy who, was absent or something like that. When he came back, I was just helping him with his work. And so I was writing stuff for him. I wasn't doing the work for him, but this one little girl came up to me and she was like, "I'm going to go tell that you're cheating," and my perfectionist little third grader self was like,
oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. It was like this whole like
The
story.
worst thing ever.
Right. I mean, it's like the story I told myself that, oh, and I was just like, first I got defensive. I mean, this is so clear as day, but first I got defensive. And then she was just like, well, if you don't want me to tell, you need to give me your lunch money. And I was like, here you go. I was just like, didn't even, and that is not how we were raised. We were raised to use our voice. Like but it was just, it just paralyzed me. And I gave the girl, I don't even know how much money over, I'm laughing now, but it's not really funny, but I gave her, so much money over the time of several weeks. But I would go into I was doing such like out of character things. I was going into my mom's wallet and just taking whatever and bringing it to school and giving, it was crazy. And finally she wasn't thanking me at all. Right. So she's asking my sister and brother, are you going to go into my wallet and take my stuff? My sister and brother were like, no. And so she got smart. She took all her money out of her wallet. One morning I went and there was nothing in there. It was only a couple dollars here and there, but still it was like, so finally I was like, I had to break down, right? I just finally had to come true, clean and say that, oh my God, I can't go to school. Like she's going to tattle on me and I'm going to go to the principal and, like all this stuff. And it was traumatic. It was traumatic for me at that age that now looking back, I'm like, I cannot believe, because we really were not raised like that. Like what caused me to like want to allow her to do that? Well, I didn't want to get in trouble, so sometimes people make these life decisions based out of fear, right? And not really out of having a mature enough brain to understand that that's not right, and all of those things. So that was just one thing that popped into my mind. And now as an adult, I talk to my kids all the time about, this is something that happened not because I didn't know what to do, and so we have to understand that there will always be people that will challenge you like that. You just have to learn to use your voice and to stand up for what you know is right. And so that was a challenge that I had to overcome. But it's taught me so much through, but definitely something that, I'm 50 years old and it still sticks with me, it's something that definitely, so back to your little, the little things, it's like people do need to start with those little things and be able to talk about it in a way, that gets it out and helps them to process through it. So I think I love that, you notice that and you work with people at that level, also the humming and things like that, the vocal part, humming is part of the vagus nerve, it's part of stimulating the vagus nerve to bring you back down into the parasympathetic. So again, if you're someone who has anxiety that pops up, or you start getting fearful of something, use it as a tool. Just try it and see. You got nothing to lose. So, you hum, you make the voice productive, and I do feel like, I don't know what the statistic is, maybe, I do feel like there are a lot of people who suppress their voice, for a variety of reasons. But I'm just curious, like in the people that you work with, is it something you see a lot of, or, is it something that's for some people, yes, and for some people, not so much?
I would say I see a fair amount. I would say, yeah, it's pretty common. And I would say this, like, I feel like there's like polar, like we're either people who use their voice a lot because of the trauma and they fight, they're in their fight response. And then we have people who are in flight or freeze, who suppress their voice by either choosing not to use it or using it in a way that is not advocating for them. And so I definitely see that. And I think, thanks for sharing your experience, because I think it's something that, for me, the way I view trauma is it's about the impact, right? It's not necessarily, it doesn't matter what the experience is. I think I have a lot of people come to me that are like, well, I'm not sure what I have experienced counts as trauma. And I'm like, if it was traumatic to you, then it is trauma. It's about that impact. And also, you brought up, it happened in childhood. And we got to think about trauma in a wider perspective of, when we have trauma, it's about what happens and how resourced our nervous system is at the time that it happens, right? Or how many resources we have to handle that. So with that being like, one of the key challenges that you had faced up to that point, it looks different. Our ability to handle that from a nervous system point of view is different, and from a communication point of view is different, right? So you didn't have necessarily the words, or didn't know necessarily who to go to, and didn't know what would happen. And so you're like, well, this is the immediate solution, is to just give her money.
Right.
And then she
just acted out of fear, really. It was just fear-based, just let me do this and get her off my back. Like, if I do this, she'll get away. It was kind of one of those, again,
And you chose the safest option that your child self knew. The safest option for your child self was, well, I'll just give her something that I know I have.
Right.
I can find money. I can give that to her. Right. And that keeps me safe, right? And your perceived threat was getting in trouble. And so that's also contextualizing things, is like, whatever our perceived threat is what the danger is. Even though now we know, as adults, maybe we know that getting in trouble, at that time probably would have looked different than we thought. We thought we were getting expelled. Right. We thought we were going to jail.
Right.
And that's what happens with trauma, is our perceived threat is so much bigger after time. Right. And then we realize, oh, like, this is actually what it is. And sometimes our perceived threat does match, but oftentimes it doesn't. And so it's all about that impact and how we're perceiving that, and also, what resources we believe we have to manage it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's really good. Because I think the resource part is, when you are little, you don't even think of that. But I do feel like, as adults, and for people who are listening, there are tons of resources to help someone who feels like they are dealing with or going through something of this magnitude, where they need to see somebody to help work through those things. So, and Tanisha is one of those people who is a great resource. So I just want to encourage people that, as you're listening to this, if things are popping up and things are coming to your mind, they're not things that should just be brushed off. You should really think about it. You should journal about it. You should really have that conversation with yourself, because it may be something that, if you need to work through it, and maybe you're not your healthiest version, or maybe you have underlying, chronic inflammation, or you have a chronic disease, or have something, just remember that we're a whole person. And part of that whole person is stuff that we've gone through. And so I do feel like it's beneficial to at least investigate and get curious about it. So one of the things I wanted to ask, because again, we have so many different listeners listening from all different experiences in life. And if someone is thinking maybe they've had something or they're dealing with something currently, what are a couple of questions people can kind of ask themselves that might help them to better discover and answer and figure out if it is something that they might want to seek outside help, or how would they work through it if they didn't want to seek outside help? What are some general tools that people can use to try to work through it, or at least get clear with what's happening within their body? I don't know if that's too much, but sorry.
No, I think you're fine. I think, the answer to that question, I would say, is if you get to the point where you're asking yourself a question, right? If you're like, I better ask myself, like, if this is something to do with, maybe it is, right? I think it's valid to say, like, if you're at the point where you're like, should I get some help? The answer is probably yeah. Like, especially if you can't really identify, you're like, well, I don't really know what can help me. It's never harmful to seek help. And I think that's so important. But I think if it's been going on for a long time and it's not present, you know what I mean? If it's happened, like, it's been 6 months since something major has happened or longer, that's a good sign that, like, okay, this isn't healing in the quote unquote natural way, and I need some more help to kind of get me where I want to be. And so I would say, yeah, 6 months or longer is going to be your post. If you're presently experiencing something, that's different, right? If your loved one is going through cancer and you're actively in that experience, one of the factors that predicts trauma is actually how many resources you're able to utilize during that process. So if you're experiencing something traumatic or something that could be seen as traumatic later, most people will deal with things. They have family support. Maybe they have a counselor, maybe they have a coach, maybe they've got loved ones or a community or a faith community that are helping them out and getting them through that process. A lot of the people that have that type of experience with something hard don't end up later saying that it's traumatic. They don't experience it as trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because they have the resources they need. They have a community. They have resources, people to turn to. And what really predicts trauma is loneliness. If you're alone in those experiences, or maybe you're the caregiver in that situation and you're the one that's kind of keeping everybody together, you're the one that's going to be at the end of the road, going to be struggling a little bit if you don't have resources. So it's important to remember that if you're in the thick of it, look at how that experience is going. And if you need to pull in some more hands, that can really prevent you from being super shaken by that later on. And if you're at the point where it is later on and it's been 6 months or longer and you're still having, maybe you're having nightmares about the experience, or just like you are experiencing emotional turmoil or pain about it, it might be good to get some help. I think those are the questions I would ask, is just the timeline of, well, how long has it been? Because you can be stuck on a lot of things. You can be stuck for many reasons. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means, for some reason, my nervous system isn't working through this. And I didn't have a lot of resources at the time. And yeah, I would like to talk about this. There's something still stirring up in my soul that's going on, and I like to approach it that way, because a lot of people are like, well, if I don't have a problem, then I don't need to see somebody. And I don't think it needs to be that simple. I think you can get help for any reason. And I think so many of us are afraid to ask for help.
Well, we've been I think society-wise, we've been conditioned to, unless it's something majorly traumatic, you just need to learn to deal with it. You hear that a lot, like
bootstraps.
Right. Like you hear a lot of, I can't even think of a name right now, but you hear a lot of things like basically suck it up, and keep going. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I absolutely 100%, just resonates with me, aligns with everything I believe, is community. It is having that village, having a community of people. And if you are not someone who has that because of circumstances or whatever, mm-hmm. then reach out to other people that do or can help you through. But I think having friends, having support within a church, if that's your spirituality and that's the way you go, or just having some type of community support system that you feel like you can tell these things to, and it's not everybody in your village is someone that you can turn and tell your deepest, darkest things to. And that's fine. But you've got to, if you have one or two or three people that you can bounce your things off of or work through it, I do think, it's very beneficial. And for me, being a mom and having a lot of mom listeners, momming through all the stages, right? You kind of pick up these little groups of women as you're kind of going through, because they're going through similar things. And those can be your tribe at that time, and maybe your tribe changes, or maybe you have ones that stay in your life forever. And all of them are great and acceptable and wonderful to help you through whatever it is you're going through. Even your partner, I'm not discounting your partner, but your partners too, you've got to learn to communicate. I think communication is key. When you're dealing with anything, really, from as little as, finding more joy in your life, to movement, to trauma. I mean, it's not all the same, but it's all the same in the respect of having community to support you through those challenging times, or, things in which you're trying to change. So,
exactly.
The body awareness, I think, is also really an interesting topic, because it's not really talked about a lot. And having body awareness, how you're feeling inside, the feelings that are coming up, I think those are super important for all aspects of life, but really trauma in general also. So having body awareness and listening to your body. Your body speaks to you. I'm a believer in that, and whether that manifests through pain, joy, soreness, stomach ache, whatever it is, I mean, your body is trying to tell you something. So listen and get curious and see what things come up. So I truly appreciate you taking the time today to come and educate all of us, and really give us some insight to what trauma looks like and things that we can do to help ourselves through it. And then when we get to that point where we feel like we're not able to, finding the assistance that can actually do that. So one of the things I ask all my guests that come on, because I truly believe in the 1% shift, they're non-negotiables. I feel like we all should have some non-negotiables daily that helps us to live our best life, no matter where you come from, what you do, where you're at in your journey. So for you, what is 1, 2, or 3 things that you on a daily basis do because they make you feel your best?
That is a great question. What are they? One of them I know for a fact. My major non-negotiable for me is actually exercise. For me, I go to the gym every day. My husband and I often like to go together. If we don't make it, because we all have those mornings when we push snooze too much, I will go later. But for me, exercise helps me a lot. Just mentally, I think, and I also have some ADHD in there. So for me, I know that because I have that, that brain style, dopamine doesn't hit first thing in the morning. For most people with a regular, kind of that normative brain, dopamine hits you first thing in the morning and helps you wake up. Your cortisol rises and you can go out the door. For those of us with ADHD, we kind of struggle with that. And for me, I don't get the morning wake up until after I've gone to the gym or after I've exercised. And some days it's just walking around the block, but that's a major non-negotiable for me. Another one is I like to think about my day and what I want to accomplish. And sometimes it's just one simple thing. Like I want to connect in a loving way that day, like with somebody, or it's not necessarily task oriented. It's like state of being oriented. It's like, I want to be this type of person today.
I love that.
That helps me a lot when I'm having a hard time too. It's just like, what's the bare minimum I can do? What can I give today? That just helps me focus on, okay, I don't have to do everything. I don't have to do a million things. That's just what I have to just one thing. And then I try to meditate most days as well. And for me, that just works because I tend to run anxious. There's a lot that I'm a kind of an Enneagram 3, which is the achiever. I like to do a lot, and my head will keep going and I'll have all these ideas. And in order to kind of stay focused and relaxed, I just need that time for myself. And that one's actually, I discovered that in recent years because I didn't used to do that. And it was a life-changing shift for me because I used to run very anxious, and I don't run nearly as anxious at all when I am doing that every day. So those are my
I love that. I love that you found a tool that helps you, in that, and you recognize that that thing does that for you. The other thing, connecting with somebody intentionally, that is such an amazing gift to give yourself as well as to give the other person. And when you're talking about, I could just pick one thing. I mean, that is like Live Life Balance is the name of my company, because you can't do all things 100% every single day. And it's just what one small 1% thing can you do today to guide you or to point you towards what you're looking to achieve. And that's usually good health, wellness, happiness, things like that, joy. And so, I do believe all 3 of those things are 1% shifts in all areas. But what I find interesting is that one little thing really has provided you with so much more. And that's why I encourage people all the time, try things out, try them on, see how they feel. How do they make you feel? Is it beneficial? If it's not, dump it. If it is, great, add it in and keep going. So
for sure.
I love it. I love your non-negotiables. Those are awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope today's episode, you really got something from it. And until next time, have a beautiful day. We'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, just so many juicy takeaways from this episode. And I just wanted to go over a couple that I thought really stood out to me. Number one, Trauma can manifest in various ways. It manifests differently in individuals, and it's not limited to just those major life-altering events. Even those little tiny minor experiences can have those significant impacts on someone's mental health and well-being. Number 2, community and support are essential. Having a support system and a community to turn to can make a significant difference on how someone copes with trauma. Loneliness can exacerbate the effects of trauma, so it's important to seek out and maintain connections with others. Number 3, listening to your body. Developing body awareness is crucial. Your body often sends signals about your emotional and mental state. Paying attention to physical sensations and feelings, as they can provide valuable insights into our well-being. And lastly, embracing the state of being. Consider what kind of person you want to be each day, focusing on your state of being rather than just accomplishing tasks. Cultivate qualities like compassion, kindness, and love in your interactions with others and yourself. That was my big aha for this episode, and I'll be walking away this week trying this on in a more, let's say, a more in tune, intentional way. I just love that. Embracing the state of being just really resonated with me. So anyways, I hope you guys have a great week, and I will talk to you guys soon.
Thanks for tuning in today. I loved being here with you. I hope that you got something from today's episode. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. Drop a comment below, and if you feel led to, download the episode and share it with someone you love that needs to hear this message. As we continue to spread the goodness of this podcast, I'd love for you to help us by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or a rate on Spotify. As we increase listeners, we will come up more often when women are searching for podcasts to listen to. To stay connected with me, you can check out my social media pages at Live Life Balanced with Robin. You can check out my website at livelifebalancedwithrobin.com. You can book a discovery call. And if you're looking for a way to get started right now, you can opt in for my new quick guide for the empty nester refresh. And as always, thank you for letting me be part of your day. It truly means a lot that you're allowing me to be on your wellness journey with you. Until next time, find peace, love, and light by breathing, being present, and allowing for all possibilities to happen.